Welcome back to iGen Politics. This is a podcast that makes politics engaging and relevant for all generations. This is Victor Shi.
And I'm Jill Wine-Banks, and today's Jill's pin is one that represents Time's Up and the Me Too movement.
This week marks the second week of the E. Jean Carroll rape trial against former President Trump. So far, E. Jean Carroll's testimony has been gut-wrenching and credible. Today, we're going to talk about what we've heard so far from E. Jean Carroll, her attorneys, and Trump's lawyer. And while this case is about E. Jean Carroll and her experience with Trump, it's also about all the other sexual assault survivors who may feel like they can't speak up. And for that, regardless of what happens in this trial, E. Jean Carroll is and will be a hero for so many people.
And of course, another hero is our guest today. He's going to help us talk about the trial, and he may have to get a phone call.
A hero?
I said a hero. Yes, that was me. You are someone who has been a long-time activist.
I don't see any.
George is just being humble.
I cannot take a compliment like that.
Well, gosh, you have to learn how to take a compliment.
Thank you.
Yes, you deserve it. You
it.
helped her get an attorney, and you encouraged her to bring this lawsuit, which we think is a very important case. And
yes.
You are a former...
I think that overstates it a little bit. I'll tell you precisely what I did.
Okay, well, go ahead and tell us. Tell me.
All right. Once upon a time, there was a lawyer. And in 2019, I saw, like everyone else, I read about what Jean had happened to Jean. It came out in New York Magazine as an excerpt of her book. And I had just seen this amazing thread by a woman named Brianna Wu on Twitter, who had basically gone through every single news article about every single woman that Trump harassed or assaulted. And I was just like, I had never looked at all of them all at once before. I mean, there were I remember them from the campaign, they were here, there. But when you look at them and stack them all like that, and to me, one of the most important indicia of whether a story is strong in a Me Too case, as we've seen with the reporting of Ronan Farrow in the New Yorker and Jodi Kantor and her colleague in the Times, is contemporaneous corroboration and the pattern. And the pattern was just remarkable, how similar many of these stories were about how he would get the woman alone, or he would just, be like an octopus on them. And there were just so many similarities that it just struck me like I felt guilty that I hadn't focused on it really before. And this thread came out just around that same time. And it occurred to me, I'm going to do a thread on the parallels between what E. Jean Carroll had just told her story and the Juanita Broaddrick allegations against Bill Clinton. And I said, I'm going to do a thread just to show, if the point being basically, hey guys, if you believed Juanita Broaddrick and you pushed her story the way the Trump campaign did in 2016, then you better damn well take Jean Carroll seriously. And I talked to a friend of mine, Molly Jong Fast, actually, who said, you should make that an op-ed. And instead of doing a Twitter thread that day, Saturday, I wrote an op-ed, and I emailed the people at the Washington Post and said, hey, would you be interested in an op-ed that says this? And the answer was, I guess not surprisingly, hell yes. And I wrote it and we published it, and it was, I thought it was one of the better things I've ever written. And basically that it made the point that, hey, in Jean Carroll's case, there were actual people she talked to within days of the incident and told about this. And then you have a much deeper and longer pattern. And then you have his lying about whether he had ever met her. You had to grab their pussy's tape from the, from the Billy
Access
Bush.
Hollywood,
Access Hollywood. And it's like, this has got, you got all these different points that, make this stronger than, and without denigrating the Broderick allegations, this is just stronger evidentiary wise. So Republicans, you better take this seriously. Of course, they did not. And the op-ed was futile in that regard, but it did make some people upset at the White House. I will not say who.
I bet I can guess.
Yeah. One of them is orange. The other one is not, and some other people. So I published this, and then it just so happened I went to a dinner party in Manhattan the following week, and pure coincidence, Jean Carroll was there. And of course, she makes a beeline to me, or I made a beeline to her, and she thanked me for writing this piece. And somehow, within a couple, this was really a short conversation. It must have been no more than 2 minutes. She said, I've been kicking around the idea, I think she said something like, I've been kicking around the idea of suing, or somehow the topic of a possible lawsuit came up. And I thought for about 0.2 of a millisecond, and I said, "You've got a case. You have a potential substantial defamation claim." And I think I recall the fact that in the Paula Jones litigation, there was there were federal claims for sex discrimination under Title VII, or not Title VII, but under some civil rights statutes. Mm-hmm. And there was a diversity claim for libel because Clinton basically called Paula Jones a liar. And it occurred to me that that's exactly what happened here. And if the event is shown to have happened, it's a straight out per se libel. And I told her essentially that. And I said, it's if that's something you are seriously consider, you should seriously consider it. Because it would be a real litigation. And then I thought for another 0.2 of a millisecond. It was one of those things where you have a flash and it's just immediately obvious what the next step would be. And I said, I think I know the right lawyer for you. And I had in my mind a person who had become a very, very, very good friend of mine, one of my dearest friends today, Robbie Kaplan of law firm Kaplan Hecker, who is just, her claim to fame, if she had never done anything else, would be pretty substantial as it was, because she won the Defense of Marriage Act case in the Supreme Court, and for Edie Windsor. And in the next day or two, I contacted Robbie and said, "Hey, I met E. Jean Carroll." I didn't have to repeat the story or the facts because obviously everybody who is literate knew the story. And I said, "Would you be interested in talking to her?" And she said yes. And I hooked them up together, and that's where we are today. Well, and the other thing I did, which will probably, I guess, if they crossed Jean on my connection to the case, they're going to do it to this other witness, is Natasha Stoyanov, who is one of the other victims whose Rule 415 evidence the judge has deemed admissible. She was the People magazine reporter who, I don't remember what year it was assigned, sadly, by her editors to do a profile of one then mogul, not candidate, Donald John Trump, and went down to Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
And he was doing his thing where he's showing how wonderful his building is and his rooms are. And he took her into one of an empty ballroom or something like that, and pushed her up against the wall and, did his thing. And, she's pushing back at him, I gather. I haven't read the story in a while. Obviously, we'll see the testimony. But I think, if I recall correctly, what happened was she was saved by a butler or somebody who basically came down and said, "Mr. Trump, Melania is coming." I think that's the story. I will have to see from the testimony. But basically, it's, the judge said this is sufficiently similar that it gets in under Rule 415 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, which ironically is part of the Violence Against Women Act signed into law by one William Jefferson Clinton. You know, the ironies never end.
Yes.
So that's my involvement with the story. And then the next week, after Jean's story came out, I got an email out of the blue to my law firm email address from Natasha saying, "Thank you for standing up for us." And she apparently was like the ringleader of all of this support group of all these Trump victims. And later there was a story in the New York Times about how they watched the election returns and they toasted me and whatnot. They all became friends of mine, and in 2019 I introduced Natasha to Eugene, and they became friends. And now Natasha is going to testify as a witness on Eugene's behalf, maybe as early as today. I think Jessica Leeds went on today. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't been on. I confess I have not been online today following the live streams. I wish I could be in the courtroom, but I don't. But it's too much effort, and I don't think it's a good idea. But
well, I'd like to be in the courtroom, and I don't have any compunctions about it. But I'm not in New York, so I'm not. But
you're also not in evidence,
right? Well, thank heavens I'm not in evidence. But there are 26 potential.
I've never been
women
admitted into evidence before. I think. Have you, as a lawyer?
Well, I once almost had to testify during the Watergate trial, but it was interesting to hear your name as a name, in testimony at a trial. So I was fascinated that we had already scheduled you to be on the show, and I was like, "Oh wow, our timing is brilliant."
You guys obviously are very great. I'm also going to put that on my gravestone. That I was admitted.
Right, exactly.
Into evidence, yes.
It is
born
it's
1963, died whenever, admitted into evidence 2023.
Well, it's fascinating that there will be two women that she told contemporaneously, which is definitely
and
powerful.
To me, that's just it's so powerful.
It's
so absolutely powerful.
Plus the two women who, 2 out of 26 possibles, who would have also corroborated that the same thing happened. The other one who is testifying was assaulted sitting next to him on an airplane
on a Brana flight. Absolutely.
I mean, totally outrageous.
She testified. I think she has been testifying, or maybe on the stand right now.
Right.
According to
So
what somebody
it's
told me.
quite outrageous. And then, as you mentioned, the grabbing pussy tape is really one of those most powerful
It's basically
things.
Absolutely.
That's him saying, "This is how I behave," and then there are 3 witnesses who say, "And that's what he did exactly to me." So I think it's going to be.
Sometimes it's funny thing when sometimes Donald Trump tells the truth. It's often very revealing. Yeah. And that was one time he was telling the truth.
So now, in terms of, let's move to a slightly different thing, which is another person who was named, who's become known, is the LinkedIn co-founder, who's also a large Democratic mega donor, Reid Hoffman, who's been identified as paying for Miss Carroll's lawsuit. And did you have anything to do with that? Is that another?
No, I have never met Reid Hoffman. When I first heard his name in connection with this, the name rang a bell, but I really didn't know who he was. And I had nothing to do with the litigation funding. Although a funny story is I've been told that before they found out it was Reid Hoffman, the defense lawyers thought that I had been funding the lawsuit, which again, it flatters me to no end. So
I'm wondering, hearing her testimony and cross-examination, it's so moving. I'm wondering what you think kind of pushed Eugene over the line to ultimately sue former President Trump.
She testified about this.
Yeah.
And I think she just was deeply offended. And I think, there's a certain naivete to Jean Carroll. If you've ever met her, she is the sweetest and nicest person you will ever meet. She is one of these people who you really can't get her to say a bad word about anybody, even people who deserve it. It's really hard. She'll say a bad word about Donald Trump now, obviously, but she's just she is the kindest and sweetest and most earnest and just she's like an open book. And I think she was surprised I mean, just judging from what I've heard, and I think what I've seen from the live blog of that, she was surprised at the reaction to the allegation. It was because Tom Horner was only one of like 20 odd jerks in the book she wrote about, like this book about, bad men. And of course she was called a liar, and to the point where he said, I've never seen her before. And like, there was a photograph in the original New York Magazine article. And then people began to ask her about, are you going to sue? And I think she was obviously very upset about her integrity being challenged. And, when she was thinking about it, and that's why she asked me that question at that party. And apparently, according to her testimony, her conversation with me crystallized an intent to sue that had been building until then. I didn't know any of that. I was just asking a question. I was just answering the question that she asked me and gave her, straight up. It wasn't a confidential, like, oh, come to my office and we have a secret. It wasn't one of these things where there was attorney-client privilege. It was in the middle of a bunch of people, and I think somebody may have been listening. It was just an off the cuff. Yeah, you. This is a real claim, ma'am. This is a real claim, and I know the lawyer for you. And that's how it happened.
And then, of course, there came a second, besides defamation, which you identified for her. The rape became possible because of a new New York law, which she couldn't have done otherwise.
Right. And it all turns on the same thing. I mean, everything rises or falls on whether the jury determines that the sexual assault occurred. And that's basically the only real issue in the case other than damages. And then, of course, dumbass Donald Trump, he had a kind of a defense that in the original case that he was sued in, that, hey, he was president at the time. And by the way, I ghost wrote the ghosts in the briefs in the Paula Jones case, and I don't think the argument should hold water. But he's claiming that, well, presidents have to respond as a matter of their job to allegations made against them, even personal ones. So I'm immune because I was president. But Schmuckhead then in 2022 repeated the libel, and that's the case that's being tried today, along with the New York State survivor sexual assault claim that was revived by the statute. So
I'll say for our listeners that the first defamation, when he was president, was sent by the New York court to DC for them to decide whether it was in the course of his job. And they said, we're not deciding that. So now,
they just said it's a fact issue for the jury, and he sent it back to, and basically what's going to happen is, if whichever way this case goes, I think will be res judicata in the first case, and then the only issue will be damages. The damages, I think, in each case may be different, but we'll see. It should be different because the first defamation probably caused more harm than the second defamation. And then, of course, she's seeking damages for the original assault, which could be quite substantial and hopefully will be quite substantial.
I would think so. And I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to her about this, but I really, even as a woman of the same age, had no idea of how devastating rape would be. But
how old are you? You do not look. Neither of you.
Well, she and I have to get together.
Especially Jill, you'll be surprised.
Like 40.
You'll be surprised. And Jill's birthday is this month too.
Oh, shush!
Not to embarrass you, Jill.
Let's not go
Happy
there.
Yes, 40th. Yes, 40th.
My 40th. Yes, my 40th. 36. Anyway, I read a book called I Will Find You, A Reporter's Investigation of the Life of the Man Who Raped Her by Joanna Connors. And it was the first time that I really realized how devastating emotionally, psychologically, the damage to Joanna was. She couldn't work for a while. And that was just that was a stranger rape. I don't know which is worse, stranger rape or being raped in Bergdorf Goodman by someone that you know is a famous person and that you can't go to court against.
I mean, I wouldn't, I don't profess to as a man, I can't even conceive of it. But it strikes me from everything that I've read and from people who have suffered assaults have described it. I mean, they're just bad all around. I mean, if it's a stranger, it's like you can't feel safe in public. You start looking behind you. It's terrifying. And then if it's somebody you can feel guilty about. Did I do something to invite this? Even if it was just sort of a little flirt, and then the guy takes advantage of it and physically overpowers the woman. I mean, psychologically, it's just terrifying. And I got to tell you, just from reading the live tweets, I found it emotionally wrenching to hear her story. Just through the live tweets, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine how emotionally powerful it must have been in the courtroom. And there was actually a New York Times report. They were doing these little updates here and there that said that two of the men on the jury, younger men, could not bear to watch the cross, even though they had been paying rapt attention. Just far, they had to look down. They couldn't watch the cross as Tacopina did his obnoxious, obscene cross.
So you called it obnoxious and obscene. Let's talk more about that. And Trump's lawyers, yesterday they asked for a mistrial, and the judge quickly denied it.
Good luck with that.
Well, based off your experience as a lawyer, I mean, you called it obnoxious and obscene. I mean, did they do anything to cast doubt in the jury? What do you make of their performance so far?
Well, I don't know about anything about the jury other than just basically it's 3 women and 6 men. I know nothing about it. That's could really tell you what's going to happen. That said, I mean, I think it's got to be one of the most difficult things to do. Cross-examination is a bit of an art. And the best cross-examinations are you just get the witness in an orderly fashion to admit the things that you think they have to admit that help you. And I remember, I mean, the best example of a great cross-examination that I have ever seen, there was this Court TV used to be in the business of actually making legal instruction videos. And the best cross-examination I ever saw was Roy Black. He's the criminal defense lawyer in Florida. Roy Black doing the cross of the alleged victim in the William Kennedy Smith trial. And he was respectful. He was methodical. And it was devastatingly effective, because what he pointed out is what happened was the woman went out on the beach with Smith, and her story was that he raped her on the beach. Then she left, and then she forgot her shoe or something, and she came back to get it. And he brought her back into the house to get it. And what this lawyer did was, okay, so you went back to the house where the rapist was, correct? Yes. And you rang the doorbell, correct? Yes. And the doorbell was in the house where the rapist was, correct? And then somebody opened the door, correct? The door was opened by the rapist, isn't that correct? And it was dark, correct? And he led you through the dark hallway, correct? The rapist, right? And he just, but it wasn't in a denigrating way. It was just very mechanical and very factual. And then she did something. She took, as proof that she had been there, she took a vase and took it with her. And then he put the vase, and then you took this vase and he put it on the ledge next to the witness chair. And basically, so the jury's seeing this saying, the woman stole this vase. And he just did it but he did it in the most untheatrical, mechanical, business-like way that obviously it must have had an impact because William Kennedy Smith was acquitted. And again, it's a reasonable doubt standard. And I'm not saying that he was or wasn't guilty in some, in the real sense, but that's the way you cross-examine a victim.
Right.
Okay, that's how you do it as a lawyer. You don't do things like you accusing them of crying, faking crying, and all of the stuff that it's just reprehensible, some of the stuff he was doing. And I don't think it helps in front of the jury. I mean, there are points he can make. The point is, you did not call the police. Now, we know women don't always call the police, but that's a fact. It's a fact that you have to bring out if you're a lawyer representing someone who is accused of sexual assault. If you did, who they just as who they did tell matters, who they didn't tell also matters. And it's usually, if it's not factually in dispute, you just bring that out in an orderly fashion. And you didn't call the police, and you didn't call the security guard, and you didn't do this, and you didn't do that. There are lots of things, you could do, distill what Tacopina did. And probably there's more stuff, you or I could do, Jill. And I think Jill would be the right person to do the cross, not me, not Victor, because, it's better to have a woman do it, I think. And,
Yes.
and you could just do, a fair cross that does that serves your client's interests and serves the interest meets your obligation as an officer of the court. And your job is to do the cross, and that can be done, but not in the sleazy mob lawyer type style that
I think you're making the exact point, George. You are pointing out that the difference between beating up the victim and re-victimizing the victim, which is how Tacopina approached it, at least on day one, and what you're describing from Black's cross, which was, and so I'm wondering, on day two, after he had the weekend to get instructed on how to do cross, do you think Tacopina did better? Because he did bring out things like,
yes,
well, you spent thousands of dollars at Bergdorf Goodman. You kept going there. You praised The Apprentice. You asked about sex with Trump.
Those are absolutely, if asked in the right tone, in the right order, in a factual and methodical way, that is appropriate and professional cross-examination. But the suggestion that he also, so he did some of that, but it was mixed in with some other stuff that I read about, like, oh, you didn't cry on TV, but you cried yesterday, implying that there were crocodile tears. Or you didn't cry Friday. That's just, I got to tell you, if I were a juror, I would be so offended by that. It would be beyond. But we'll see. We don't know. I mean, juries, I'm not predicting an outcome here. I'm not going to lie. I think I believe Jean Carroll, and I think she was victimized. I think she's telling the truth. I hope she gets a verdict here. But as trials are not necessarily predictable things. They're human events, and it's like Derek Jeter used to say about baseball. At the end of the day, the prognostication doesn't matter. You have to play the game, and this is the same thing in the law. You have to have a trial, and that's our system. And trials don't always come out the way you want or the way they should, but that's what keeps us a society of laws and rules, and not people just shooting at each other and acting like animals.
And I do think that juries take things very seriously. I really
absolutely
do believe in the jury system. I do think that the first impression is hard to change, and Tacopina's first impression was as a bully, and that no matter how much he may have ratcheted down his behavior, I'm not sure that it's going to help him a lot. And you made an interesting point about whether a woman cross-examiner would have been better. And in Watergate, we actually had a discussion about Mardian, who was one of the defendants, and whether I should cross-examine him, because if I could get him to show his true personality, which was known as a hothead, mean person that nobody liked, it would be
and he
much,
would be mean to the woman, the young
exactly.
woman.
It would be way worse than
you must have been like 5 then. Yeah.
I was very young. I was, but I did get him to yell at me. And
That's my math.
his defense lawyer says that the reason he got convicted is because he yelled at me. And so it worked. I mean, not that he wasn't guilty. There was plenty of evidence.
No, I mean, a courtroom is, it is in part, I mean, I'm not going to say a dramatic performance. It's because it's real and people are supposed to tell the truth, but it is, it's a show. I mean, you're putting on a program to show people what happened, and you need to keep their attention, and the human part of it is essential to it.
Absolutely. Well, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Victor, on this question.
Well, I was going to ask you about Donald Trump. I mean, we mentioned Donald Trump a little bit earlier. Orange Man. Yes.
I like to call him the former guy.
The former twice impeached, indicted president.
Twice impeached, indicted, and we'll see if he's liable. But.
Yeah.
So he went on his social media platform, which I understand that you are also on, and he's been attacking E. Jean Carroll. What is your reaction to everything Trump has been saying on social media? And is there a possible jury and witness tampering case here?
Well, I don't know that there's a witness tampering case. That's pretty, you'd have to have, I think, I mean, I defer to Jill, the actual prosecutor. I think you'd actually have to have direct contact with the jury to do that. I mean, you could possibly, if there was a specific gag order in place, which I don't think there quite is, or there could be, if he misbehaves any further, you could have a contempt citation. I don't, I think his social media posts are designed to, obviously persuade and gin up his own people into thinking that he is a persecuted victim, and they sometimes have been designed to intimidate witnesses, as we saw during the Mueller investigation, and to also, I mean, he was essentially, I don't know, dangling, maybe not dangling pardons, but hinting to people that, you're my friend, doing all sorts of things that I think were grossly improper, and, approaching the bounds of legality. And here, it's part of his general approach to all of his litigation issues is he's basically, I think he's between now and November of 2024, he's going to foment some violence. I fear that we're going to have some kind of maybe not a full-scale riot at a federal building or a state building, but there are just these people out there who just buy everything he says, and they think that this is war, and they have AR-15s. It's a terrifying thing. And he's a sociopath, a psychopath, he's a malignant narcissist, he's whatever term you like. He has no conscience, no remorse, and his view is going to be, if somebody gets killed, these are the things that happen when people try to do bad and evil things to me.
Well, I think we can look at what he said on January 6th about people coming in with guns. They're not after me.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Who cares? Let him in.
Right, let him in. And then now he was in New Hampshire the other day, where some woman had a backpack she had brought to the January 6th insurrection, and he signed it.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God!
It's disgraceful.
Yeah.
It's just horrific.
I think to Victor's question about is this jury or witness tampering, it's really tricky between his right to speak out, but he has a forum for speaking out, and that's the trial. And he's not coming to the trial; he's trying to reach the jury and witnesses through his social media platform by threatening them there. And so,
as if anyone was on Truth Social.
And when you think about it, the fact that I can't imagine. I suspect Robbie will do the closing. The closing he will get to talk about they'll get to talk about, unlike in
Yeah.
a criminal case, the
Yeah,
fact that he
yeah.
did not show up and did not testify.
Yeah.
And when
Right,
you really
right.
break it down, I mean, this is a preponderance of the evidence standard because it's
Right.
a civil case, not reasonable doubt. And preponderance of the evidence means just 50.00001%, like more likely than not that what the plaintiff says happened occurred. And there is essentially no evidence on the defense side, given that Donald Trump is not testifying, and I doubt that Robbie Kaplan will designate the portions of his deposition where he denied the event. You've got Jean's testimony, you've got the testimony of the people she told afterward, like Lisa Birnbach, I forgot the name of the other woman, and then you've got the testimony of the victims under other victims under 415, Rule 415, and you've got the Access Hollywood tape.
Yeah.
And against that, what do you have? Nothing. There is no evidence. Nobody has sworn in the right hand and said, he didn't do this. I didn't do this.
And there will be,
I mean,
expert testimony. The experts,
Right,
I
and there
think,
will be-
will also say,
Right.
this is very common behavior that you don't report it to the
Right.
police.
But Jean
Yeah.
apparently did a very good job of explaining that
Yes.
herself. And I think, in 2023, people get that.
Yes.
People who have been paying attention, particularly, I think, New Yorkers, who are more attentive to, the current, they read more, they understand more, they're more sophisticated. I think they understand that. And I think that, she should win. That's my feeling based upon those factors. She should win because there really is no evidence to counter hers. But we'll see. All it takes, I think the best outcome, could be famous last words that are wrong. I don't think it's possible for Trump to get a verdict in his favor, a unanimous verdict in his favor.
No.
I think that the best he could hope for is one or two jurors saying, just sticking to their guns and being pro Trump or something, and refusing to hear the evidence. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll absolutely see. That's why we have the trial.
Exactly. So speaking of trials, there's a bunch of other cases pending, either actually pending or under investigation. And so I'm wondering if you'd like to talk about any of those. We can look at January 6th, where Vice President Pence has, in quite a unique circumstance, been called to testify. And first of all, do you know him well enough to opine on whether you think he will tell the truth, the whole truth?
I think, look, I've met Mike Pence. It's funny, I'm actually a relative of Mike Pence.
What? How is that?
What?
My wife's cousin, who she considers a niece, and I met her when she was her name is Giovanna. I met her when she was 4 years old, 20 odd years ago. And Kellyanne got her a job in the White House, and she met this nice young man, a very nice young man named John Pence, who is the son of Congressman Pence, who is the brother of Mike Pence. So they were married about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was at the wedding, and I was at the groom's, the bride's table, and sitting right behind me was the groom's table, and the Vice President of the United States was sitting right there.
Wow.
I think Mike Pence, I find to be a frustrating person. I think he deep down means to be decent and honorable. I think he wants to be truthful. I think he has a sense of obligation that I think made him do the right thing on January 6th. On the other hand, January 6th could have never come about, but for the fact that he did not speak out before then. He had, I think, an independent obligation to concede the election well before then. And I think one of the reasons why January 6th came about was that he was just hoping Trump would just, do the right thing, which is not always a good bet. So I have no doubt that he is going to tell under oath in a grand jury, he's going to tell the truth. And, the truth is going to be that the president of the United States tried to coerce him and persuade him to engage in criminal conduct. So, and the fact that Special Counsel Jack Smith has gotten to the point of getting to Mike Pence's testimony, I think that would be one of the last pieces, and I'll defer to you again, Jill, as the criminal prosecutor, as a former prosecutor. That would be one of the last things I'd put before the grand jury before actually seeking a true bill.
Yes.
So we'll see. And I think that case, is pretty substantial. I think the case that is the most substantial, the easiest, the simplest, and that may be coming even sooner than that would be the Mar-a-Lago documents case. I don't see what the defense is there. I think they have him dead to rights. He took the documents. They asked for the documents back. He refused to give them back. He refused to give them back. He refused to give them back. He gave some of them back. He had his lawyers tell the government that he'd given them all back, which was a lie. They subpoenaed the documents. He gave some more back. He didn't give them all back in response to the subpoena. Had a false statement issued by, I guess, whoever the woman was who was the lawyer who played the
Christina
kind of scapegoat
Bob
here. Yeah, Christina Bob. I think the obstruction case is just devastating there. And I think that also distinguishes the Pence and Biden situations. And I just think they have him dead to rights on that one. And then there's, Fani Willis. I think she, as we know, she wrote a letter to Georgia, a local law enforcement saying, you be on alert because we're going to, we have this grand jury and we may bring some charges between July 11th and September 1. I don't think you would write that kind of letter if you were simply indicting the fake electors or Rudy Giuliani or Mark Meadows. So my view overall about the situation in the United States of America over the next 18 months is that it's going to be a shit show, the likes of which we have never, ever seen, because one, Trump is going to be indicted at least 2 more times, maybe 3 more times. 2, he is going to foment violence. 3, he is going to get the Republican nomination anyway. And 4, I hope I think he's not going to get reelected. And if he is, well, I don't know, New Zealand, Canada, Portugal. I know there are nice countries out there. I'd have to learn Portuguese.
I hope you're right on everything except number 2, which is fomenting violence.
I just don't see how. I just don't see how there isn't going to be something. It's just, I just, because he cannot help himself. He cannot help himself.
Yeah, and it's also even just lone actors. It doesn't have to be the Proud Boys. It's the guy who went to the FBI office with a gun to kill people. Because
he will have been fomented by Trump, by Trump's lies, by Trump's playing of the persecuted, playing the persecuted victim by the social media. There's no question about it. I just think that something will happen. Hopefully, it will not be serious. I hope no more deaths.
And Victor and I were both Biden delegates, and so we certainly hope that.
Oh, you liberals!
Yes.
Actually, no, I'm a liberal now too because I'm against rape and insurrection. I'm now a liberal.
Okay, well then we welcome you as that kind of a liberal.
Yes,
we're very happy
you have a home with us.
Able to join us, and we hope that your prediction is right, that Donald Trump is not going to be reelected, and that he will, for me, do some kind of penance for his wrongdoing. That's all we can say, and that we hope there will be justice for E. Jean Carroll. Maybe someday I'll get to meet her at a dinner party. That would be fantastic.
Maybe someday I'll get to meet you. I've now met Victor electronically, and now I've met you,
electronically.
And I love the pins.
Thank you.
Yes,
well, I'm coming to Washington with a live show of the hashtag Sisters-in-Law. And
Okay,
I'm
well,
going
you
to
have my
send
email
you.
address. You haven't.
I'm sending you an
I want.
invite.
Can I get a? I want a
I
good
want
seat.
you. I want you in the audience and at the after
I want a
party.
good seat, though. I
Oh.
don't, I'm a, you know,
You don't
I'm a
take
seat
back
snob.
Simon is
Not,
listening,
not in
and
the
he's going to do it.
rafters, not in the rafters. I want a good seat
We'll get
where
you
I can
there.
see the pin, where I can see what pin you're wearing.
Exactly. I'll be wearing a sisters-in-law pin. We have our own special pin.
I love you guys.
So,
I love
There
you
we
guys.
go.
thank you so
All right.
much, George. This
Thank
has
you,
been
George.
absolutely fabulous. I'm so glad you were able to take the time to be with us today, and
Pleasure
thank you
to
for
be
all
here.
you're doing to fight the false news that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth.
Wow.
Thank you, George.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that was a great episode. And I think at least I learned a lot about this case and E. Jean Carroll just on a personal level from George. And I just really hope, I mean, it seems like there was another witness today who said that E. Jean Carroll called her minutes after the rape. And that just went down during when we were recording. So I fingers crossed that E. Jean Carroll gets the justice that she deserves. But like we said at the beginning, even if she doesn't, I think her testimony and this trial will have a big impact on future generations.
And I hope your generation will be more forthcoming than mine was
Yes,
in terms of reporting these kinds of crimes. I know from my work recently with the Pentagon looking at sexual assault in the military that even for your generation, it is not easy to come forward with rape allegations. And part of it is because of people like Joe Tacopina, who bullied the victim. And that's, some of his cross examination, Victor, goes back to literally when I got out of law school, there were no rape shield laws. Rape shield laws say that you cannot say to a woman, well, you've had sex before, you weren't a virgin. And that has nothing to do with whether you were raped or not. You can be raped if you're married for 30 years. If you don't consent to having the relationship, it's rape. And I felt like we were back at a time when, what were you wearing? She was asked. And you were flirting with him, weren't you? Those are questions that have nothing to do with when you say no, it means no. And that's something that you as a young man have to understand is when does no mean no? And you can't, you have to stop. I don't care. So I'm hoping that that's something that is learned by your generation and that women will be safer and that they will be freer when attacked, particularly by someone they know as opposed to stranger rape. But even stranger rape is a difficult thing to go forward with. The psychological damage of having to relive and talk about the rape means a lot of women will not report and will not go to the police. So it's hopefully that's what we've learned.
Yes, I hope that's what we learned too. And I know just for young people, I was reading this article and just the number of conversations I think young people are having to reduce the stigma from sexual assault and kind of this whole situation. I think it is getting better, and I just only hope that Me Too, I think, was a big moment. So was, I think, Dobbs, the fall of Dobbs. I think more people are willing to have that conversation now about what it means to, consent and that it's both a man and a woman, a young man and a young woman in this. And so it takes two people. But I think the conversations are being had. But I really hope this E. Jean Carroll case just further shows that it's okay to speak up. It's okay to have these conversations. It's needed. And it's we all need to do it. So
exactly.
Lots to be learned. We thank George Conway for being on today. We'll be back next week with another episode of iGen Politics. You don't want to miss that. Find us wherever you follow your podcasts. If you aren't watching us on YouTube, you can follow us at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, really wherever you follow your podcast. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review or rating. And if you don't listen to us, you can also find us on YouTube and subscribe to us there. Thank you everyone for watching or listening, and we will see you next week.